Hi, so we're going to do a presentation on Crop Planning 101, and this is going to walk you through the basics of crop planning so that you can really be in charge of your garden this year. So you determine what, where, and when you're going to plant something and know approximately when you're going to be able to harvest it, and then what's going to go in to that space once you've harvested a crop. So with crop planning, there are 3 basic questions you need to answer. And these are, what do you want to grow? And when do you want to plant it? And where are you going to plant it? So we're going to go through these questions one by one and answer them in this presentation. So what do you want to grow? This is where you think about, what do you like to eat? What does your family like to eat? What do you buy a lot of at the grocery store? What do you wish you could buy but don't feel like you can afford because it's too expensive? Are there veggies you want to try canning or freezing so that you can be able to use them all year? If you had a garden last year, think about what crops did well and what didn't, and if you want to grow them again this year. And then also think about what kind of new vegetables maybe you don't eat very often or you've never had before that you would like to try to grow just because they seem kind of interesting. I think with gardening, it's really fun to experiment. Like this year, I'm going to be growing peanuts and edamame in my garden. I've never grown these before. I don't know how they're going to do, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun to try and experiment, and that's really what I want to encourage y'all to do too. Just try new things out, have some fun. If you really hate it, just don't grow it the next year. Give it to your neighbor and move on. It's all right. At least you tried. So, once you have a list of what you'd like to try growing, you need to figure out how many of each crop you need to grow. And, you can answer some questions like, do you want to eat this thing once or twice a week? Do you want to eat it every day? Do you need a large quantity of it so that you can be able to freeze or can so that, for preserving for the winter? So these are questions you can think about in terms of quantity, and then to help you kind of figure this out, I have a plant cheat sheet with a bunch of different information on it, including plants per person, and that's in this column here. And so the lower number, if you want this just once or twice a week, you can go with the lower number. If you want it, more often, you can go with the higher number. If you really like something, you can go, even more than that. So you can have lots of it. If you want to can or freeze it, I would double or triple that top number there, just so you'll have enough for fresh eating and also plenty that's going to be mature around the same time so that you can, go through the effort of canning or freezing it. Again, these are just suggestions. If you just want to try something new, you can do maybe 1 or 2 plants total. If this is everyone's favorite thing, plant a bunch of it. So just use these as kind of a general guidelines, but and as you in the following year, make note on your crop plan, was this enough, was this too much, that kind of thing, and you can really kind of hone in on the right number of plants per person for your family. So I also want to point out, this is when should you plant it, and different crops are grown during different seasons. Mainly there's cool season and warm season. So cool season crops are either early spring or late fall, and these crops don't do well when it's hot. They really prefer cool temperatures, and when it gets too hot, they can flower and become bitter. So these are a little tricky to time. And they include leafy greens, peas. A lot of your root vegetables are considered cool season crops. Warm season crops are your typical summer crops, and these need to be planted once nighttime temperatures regularly stay above 50 degrees. And in our Zone 7 East Tennessee region, this is usually the first or second week of May. And this includes most of your fruiting plants like tomatoes, peppers, beans, so kind of your typical summer standards. And on the plant cheat sheet, again, I've got in this column here the first spring planting, and this is, you can say March or April is your, your early spring crops, and then May would be your summer crops, and then again, over here we have our last fall planting. So if you're doing succession sowing or you want to do it, plant a crop for the fall, cool fall season, you can see which month is the last month that you can get that in the ground. Okay. So another concept to consider during this plan is that plants produce food differently. So some crops, you plant them once and they produce food for the whole season. So this would be tomatoes, peppers, peas, pole beans, kale, collard, chard, that kind of thing. As long as the plant is still alive, it will keep producing. Now, there's lots of reasons why your plant might die, disease or pests or bad weather or something. But barring all of that, if you plant this once, it's going to produce generally for the whole season. So the next category is crops that produce for an extended period of time, but not for the whole season. So, they usually produce 3 or 4 weeks, and then they may get old and be less productive, or they become diseased and they die. So if you want this crop steady through the whole year, you need to replant it, every month or so. So this includes cucumbers, summer squash, bush beans, spinach, cut lettuce mix, so kind of cut and come again lettuce. So all of these, every 3 to 4 weeks is probably a good time, so that when the plant starts to die, the first round, the second round is almost ready to come into production. So you'll have, only a very short interruption, if any, in your supply of that food. The last category is crops that are killed when you harvest them. And so if you harvest everything, in the 1 week, if you've not already planted seed, then you're not going to have any the next week. So this is head lettuce, cabbage, carrots, radishes, beets, most root vegetables would fall in this category. So you should be planting, a small amount every week so that you can have a steady supply. And this doesn't, there are plants that, are killed when you harvest them, like potatoes or winter squash even, but these are storage crops, so you would harvest them once, but they don't, they're shelf stable. You can keep them in storage, so you can keep eating from plant once, and then you'll still be eating off of it through the whole year. You don't need to replant it like you would lettuce, which maybe lasts for a week in your refrigerator and then starts to rot, and you need to have more to harvest, or you're out of lettuce. Again, with the plant cheat sheet, we've got successions per season. So if it says 1, that just means you plant it once and you should be able to harvest it for the whole season. And then we've got suggestions. So some things you replant, just a few times every month or 2 months to get a supply going. And then there's some, it just depends on how much you want to eat. Like beets, for instance, you could be planting, every week if your family really loves beets. And, these are just guidelines. Really just do what you want to do, and keep in mind that the harvest intervals for things, so that you have as much as you want or as little as you want in your garden. So our final question is, where will you plant it? And this is when we're going to start diagramming out our garden. So you need to know the dimensions of your garden, and then you need a piece of graph paper so you can draw it to scale. And each square on that graph paper can be a foot. It can represent half a foot. It really just pick a scale that's going to be easy for you to draw, easy for you to see, and to annotate where your crops are going to go. Also, you need to note where the sun rises and sets on your property, and mark these directions on your sheet. And for me, I think the best orientation is to get your rows going from east to west. This is the best optimum for sunlight throughout the day. However, it's not always possible to do that. Some people just have odd-shaped yards and they have to run it a certain direction, or especially if your garden is on a slope, you need to orient your rows along the contour of the hill. Because if they're facing, up and down the hill, then you run the risk of your garden washing away. So I know that east to west, that orientation is not always possible, but it is optimal. So as best as you can, get your rows going east to west. So in this next part, you need to draw out your planting beds and your pathways to scale on your garden diagram. And sometimes I see garden diagrams that don't have pathways, so you're vastly overestimating the amount of space that you have when you do that. So be sure to include your pathways in there so that you can, walk in and weed and water your plants. The planting beds, the area where you're going to be growing, I like to do wide ones. So I make them at least 2 feet, up to 3 feet wide. You don't want them too wide because your arm is only so long. So if your bed is too wide, then you'll have to step in it in order to get into the middle, and you want to avoid stepping on your planting area because you will compact your soil, and especially with our clay, you can do damage to your soil structure by stepping on it, so we want to avoid that. So we want to be able to access the interior of the bed from the pathway. Pathways, I would suggest, be at least 1.5 to 2 feet wide. And that way you're maximizing your amount of growing space you have and minimizing the amount of walking space. However, if you have trouble bending over or kneeling for long periods of time, you can make your pathways a little wider to kind of accommodate something for you to sit down on. And if your garden is really large, you should probably make an extra wide center pathway through the garden so you can put a wheelbarrow through it so you can, you're not having to run around far to reach your wheelbarrow for stuff. Smaller gardens, generally you can access it from the outside, so it's okay. So this is a diagram. It's 20 by 25 square feet, and each square on this diagram represents a square foot. So as you can see, I've got 4 growing beds, and they are 3 feet wide, and there's 2 feet of pathway in between each bed. Okay, now you need to figure out where you want to put your crops. So you've already gotten a list of what crops you want to grow, and you've kind of estimated how many plants of each crop you want to grow. So now we're going to try to fit it into your diagram, and this is where you figure out, do I have enough space, or do I have too much space? Can I grow more? Can I grow less? That kind of thing. So, and also, this is where we're going to have to start doing a little bit of math. I apologize for that, but our crops are all different sizes, and they have different spacing needs, and you don't want to overcrowd crops because that will cause them to be stunted and more disease prone. But if you give crops too much space in your garden, you'll be less productive overall because you'll have more space and fewer plants. So I prefer to follow the principles of square foot gardening, which generally spaces plants closer together than recommendations listed on the seed packet. And you can go online and find a lot of information about square foot gardening and spacing. But if you have a seed packet with information on it, you can always rely on that. It may be a little wider, but it will definitely work at that spacing. So again, I've got the plant cheat sheet with some kind of general rules of thumb for plants, different crops. So we've got the plant spacing in inches, and this is the space in between individual plants in a row. So basil should be, each basil plant should occupy its own square foot. Okay, and then we've got row spacing, and this is the space in between rows. So we've got spacing between plants in a row, and then we've got spacing between rows of plants. Okay. So with our 20 by 25 garden, we've got 4 planting beds. Now in row spacing, so this is the space between plants. If your plants need 12 inches of space, a foot per plant, then you can fit 25 of them in a 25-foot row. Okay. If your plants need 18 inches of space, then you can fit 16 of them in a 25-foot row. Okay. If your plants if they're small, they only need 4 inches of space. Okay. That means you can plant 3 of them per foot. So that's 75 plants in one row, one 25-foot row. Okay. So between row spacing. So small crops need less space between rows. So a radish needs 4 inches of space. So if your row is 1 foot wide and 25 feet long, then that you can put 3 rows in that foot, and so that's 225 radishes. So that's a lot of radishes in not much space, okay? Whereas in that space, you would definitely only be able to fit like 16 tomato plants. Now, you have to, the minimum, so small crops like radishes or green onions, you know, they can go close together. However, I want to warn you that, you know, your minimum row space should be the size of your weeding tool. So if you have a 6-inch hoe, then you need to keep 6 inches between, you know, at least 6 inches of space between your rows so you can get your hoe in there. If you have a smaller hoe, 4-inch hoe, you know, your rows can be a little closer together. Just, you know, you want to make it easy for you to get in there and weed around your crops. Alternatively, some crops have really long, sprawling vines and they need a lot of space. So the average zucchini plant needs 3 feet of space on each side. So it needs, you know, 9 square feet of space to grow. Some things like these, you know, these sprawling, you know, winter squash vines, maybe they need your entire garden because that just seems to be how much they grow. So just be aware of how big and small your plants are in this spacing. But also remember that our planting beds are 3 feet wide. So you could have 9 rows of radishes if you wanted to fill your entire bed up with radishes. So we'll look at a diagram and really kind of explore these wider beds. So here we have our diagram, our garden diagram filled out. And I just want to note that I try to group plants in the same family in the same color. So you'll see the tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, they're all in the nightshade family, so they're all the same color. Cucumbers, zucchini are both cucurbits, so they're the same color. And then I just have different colors for other crops, you know, that I just assigned in my crop plan. And it's arbitrary, just pick a color you like. So you'll notice in bed 1 that the tomatoes and the cucumbers are on trellises. And so the trellis picks the plant up off the ground and grows them vertically. So it helps them take up less space. So because they're on a trellis and my bed is 3 feet wide, I have space on the far end of the bed to put in some herbs and, you know, got a mixture of basil, parsley, cilantro, just whatever herbs I have on hand. I'm going to put that on the edge of the bed here, and they are not going to compete with the roots, you know, too much of the tomatoes and the cucumbers, so they'll just kind of be a happy bed together. In this next bed, I've put potatoes and green beans, and that combination is kind of an old companion planting combination. So those often are planted together, and they're supposed to help you control the pests on the other. In the third bed here, I've got lettuce, carrots, green onions, radishes. So these are all small crops, and so they each get their own, you know, foot of the 3-foot bed to grow on. And then in the last row, I've got some kind of bushier plants. So these are not tall, they're just kind of big plants. I've got mixed peppers, zucchini, and sweet potatoes. And then in this diagram, I've actually labeled out how many plants are going to go in a square foot. So you can see that tomatoes, you know, I'm putting a 2-foot space in between my tomatoes, so each plant is spaced out like this, but the cucumbers only need a foot each. So they're spaced, you know, every square foot, there's a cucumber on the trellis. And then I'm giving the herbs, you know, a lot of space just because they're in this bed with these trellises, so I just want to keep them kind of spaced out. Potatoes, I'm cramming a lot of those into this bed. I'm going to grow a lot of potatoes because when I harvest those, you know, I'll be able to store them and, you know, have them for the whole year. So I'm going to grow a lot of potatoes. And then I've got my green beans, and this is going to be for fresh eating and also for canning because that's going to be a lot of green beans. And you'll notice that the green beans, I'm actually fitting 4 plants in a square foot. Excuse me. Because the bush beans are pretty small and you can pack them in there. Lettuce is the same, you know, 4 plants per square foot. Carrots, even smaller, so I'm going to fit 9 of those. Green onions, you know, these are some of the smallest plants you can grow, so I'm going to actually fit 18 plants per square foot. Now with these bigger ones, peppers need about a 24-inch, so a 2-foot spacing. So in my 3-foot bed, I can actually fit 6 peppers if I do them on the edges. Zucchini, this needs a lot of space. So each one of these plants gets 9 square feet of space on its own. And the sweet potatoes have really long vines that kind of sprawl around, so they also get a lot of space in the bed. All right, so once I know where everything's going to go, I like to write it down in a planting log. And I just made this on an Excel spreadsheet. So I've got the plant type, and then I've got the variety name, and then I've got what bed it's listed in. So tomatoes and cucumbers are in bed 1, and again, I've got 2-foot spacing on the tomatoes, so I've got 6 tomato plants, but I've got 13 cucumbers in a pretty similar size space. And then I'm going to estimate what day I want to plant. So I know these are warm season crops, so I need to plant these, first week of May. And then days to maturity, this you can find, in the seed catalog or on the seed packet itself. And this is kind of an estimate when it's going to be ready to be picked. But you have to keep in mind that for certain crops like tomatoes, the days to maturity symbolizes the days from transplanting to first fruiting. So it assumes you're starting with a plant. So if you're going to start your own seeds, you need to count back 6 weeks to when you're going to start your plant indoors. Whereas the cucumber, the days to maturity is from the time the seed is planted in the ground, because usually you just sow those in the field directly. So if you do start your cucumber indoors, a week or 2 ahead, then you can take a week or 2 off of your days to maturity. It'll mature a little bit faster. And because this is an Excel spreadsheet, it automatically calculates the first harvest date for me. So at least I'll have an estimate of when I should look to harvest, my first things off these vines. So in bed 2, I've got potatoes and green beans. And then in bed 3, I'm starting on lettuce. And so you'll notice I've got 4 entries for lettuce. And this is because I want to succession sow lettuce. So if we go back to this other slide, you'll notice there are, this row of lettuce is really long. So this is probably about 100 heads of lettuce, okay? That's way too much lettuce. If I planted this all at once, unless I was trying to sell lettuce, that's way too much lettuce. I'm not going to eat 100 heads of lettuce in a week. That's pretty extraordinary. So with this, I'm going to succession sow 16 heads of lettuce every 2 weeks. So I've got the first week of April, mid-April, 1st of March, 1st of May, mid-May, okay? And days to maturity are 40 or 50 days. And so I've calculated that every 2 weeks I'll have, some fresh lettuce heads coming in. So I will have a steady supply. And going back here, basically, if I were to do this time-wise, I would have lettuce the first 4 beds, or sorry, these first 4 feet, I'd have, start my first round of lettuce. This would be under, the rest of the row would be under a thick layer of mulch, and then, the next week I'd plant more, the next week more, the next week more. It's about 5-6 weeks from seed to mature plant. So, I just need about 5 weeks of lettuce to be available. And then I can go back and start planting, in week 6 or 7, I can plant that in where I put the first round in. So I still have space for it. I don't need, 20 weeks of space for lettuce. I just need 6 weeks of space because that's how long it takes to grow. Okay, some tips for crop planning. Come up with your crop plan before the season starts so you don't have to think about what to do next. During the middle of the season, you've already got a plan in place, you know what's going in. However, weather and life happen, so take really good notes on your plan of what actually happened. If you planted something 2 weeks late or it was just beautiful weather 2 weeks early, that kind of thing. Make notes so that the following winter you can adjust your plan. If things are coming in earlier or later, your plan will become more tailored because your first year is definitely just a guess of what's going to happen. But as you get more experience, the plan will become more concrete. You'll be able to rely on it better. And also it's going to take a lot less time in future years to do your crop plan because you'll just be modifying or tweaking it. You're not going to be creating it new every year unless maybe you have to, move property, move a garden or something. And then you'll probably want to start over in those new conditions. So anyway, that is crop planning, hopefully the simplified version. And hopefully this will be a good resource for you. You can come back to and watch it as you are going through your crop plan. So good luck and happy growing.